Hey guys, welcome back to an interesting video on Wild Rift. So today we're back with the patch 4.3b first look breakdown. Now you guys might be wondering, why are we breaking down the first look? We've never done that, and that is absolutely correct. We have actually never done a first look breakdown before, because personally I always felt that there was not really a point, because might as well just wait for the final patch notes. However, for the next couple of months, the days that the patch is released, I'm gonna be pretty busy, so I'm gonna have to wake up early in the morning at 6, and I'm only gonna be back late at night, so I wouldn't be able to actually do the actual real patch notes breakdown. So I'm gonna break down the first look instead, which generally is like 90% plus the same as the actual patch notes anyway, so we at least can have some content covering what is going to be the changes. Of course, we can't see the context, which is why they're making these changes, but we can generally infer them ourselves, and generally the context doesn't matter too much anyway most of the time. So anyways, this is going to be the way we're doing it for the next couple of months, but and next couple of patches. Not too many patches, honestly, because one patch is every 2-3 weeks, but let's jump straight into talking about the patch. So first up, we're starting off with Aatrox. So Aatrox is getting a passive buff when you're hitting minions. So the healing effect when you hit minions is going up by 10%, and so is the damage of your Q on minions. So this seems to imply that Aatrox is not doing too well, so they're letting him heal more from minions, which is generally what they don't like you to have, because they want you to interact more with enemy champions. So the fact that they're giving him more healing on minions and also increasing his wave clear on minions implies that he's not doing too hot. And honestly, I can kind of see that in my games as well, because Aatrox used to be really strong, and nowadays he's just pretty much alright. You don't see him taking over games anymore, so I do think he's pretty weak, and do think that these buffs are going to help. Now Akali, I think, is getting a huge buff. So the passive, which used to allow you to gain extra movement speed when you're walking towards your ring, and after you proc your ring and when you're walking back towards the enemy champion, used to be a flat 30%. But as you guys can see, it's now scaling from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60%. So this is not going to affect early game at all. But mid to late game, she's getting a lot of extra movement speed. And this is a really huge buff, because this allows her to actually weave in and out more easily, which is obviously what she wants. She generally she Qs, walks out, procs passive, walks back, autos, ease back out and whatnot. So it allows you to go in and out of fights very much more easily, and this is literally double from 30 to 60% at the later levels. I think 60% is when you hit level 11 or 13 or something like that. But in compensation, actually, it's not even in compensation. I thought that this was a nerf, but this is actually also a buff. The energy consumption of her 5-point strike, which is her Q, is going down at the lower ranks. So you do max this first. So this basically is going to mainly help her laning phases. At the rank 1 and 2, the difference is going to be quite significant. And why this is increasingly even more significant is because I believe that Akali has 200 energy at base. So I believe that when you cast a Q at level 1, level 2, level 3, etc., you're gonna have to wait for an energy to recharge before you can cast your Q again. But with 105 now, I believe that when you Q once, you only have to wait for a second or so to get back that 5 energy to Q again. So I believe that this is actually also a huge buff. Now, personally, I don't really think Akali needed a huge buff. I didn't think she was weak, and I didn't think she was too strong either. I actually think she was in an okay spot, but I feel like these buffs are gonna actually make her really strong, a lot more so than what they probably want. But we're gonna have to see. I think that this is a pretty huge buff to Akali, whereas with Akshan, his AD per level is going up by 1, so better scaling. His comeuppance, which is his ulti, his scaling remains the same, but his base damages are going up for both his minimum damage and his maximum damage. Honestly, I think that this is completely negligible, because his ult is rarely useful anyways. He's normally blocked by minions, champions, towers, or something that's not hitting the enemy champion. So honestly, majority of the time, I think that this is not really going to matter all that much. And AD per level increased by 1, more or less 1, does help, but it's overall going to give you extra 14 AD at the later stages of the game, which is, it's alright, but it's nothing to write home about. Now, Fiora Lunge can now hit towers, this is something that PC has always had, so I don't know why Wild Rift took so long to add it, but now Fiora is going to push even faster, because she can now Q onto turrets. So Irelia's W, which is the one that gives her damage reduction, the damage reduction portion is actually getting increased from 50 to 60 percent. Not 50, yeah, 50 to 60%, plus your AP ratios, which generally you don't build any AP on Irelia. So generally, basically, it's a 50 to 60% increase, which is gonna make her a lot more tanky. Now, most people don't use the W damage reduction properly anyways, so this is only really gonna affect the high-level Irelia players, in my opinion, because most low-level Irelia players are not too good at using her W anyways, and the damage is actually going up in the earlier stages, but it's actually going down in the later stages, which is pretty interesting. That they're nerfing her damage at the last rank, but they are increasing damage at the first rank, and overall this is a huge buff because firstly, you get more damage reduction, which is amazing. Secondly, you max this ability last, so it's going to be on first rank for pretty much the entire time anyways. So having this extra double damage, basically 10 to 20, is also going to be pretty huge. So Irelia also getting a big buff. And Jarvan is getting a really interesting... I mean, honestly, everyone here is getting buffs. These are all buffs. There's almost no nerfs in this entire patch. Jarvan, the cooldown on his passive on hitting the same target is going down by 1 second. Really useful for his damage output. His shield value is actually going up because he's now getting a 4% max health modifier on his shield, which is something that people have wanted for a long time, and they're finally adding it because his base numbers on his shield are pretty horrific. Like, the shield is really small. Like, those who play Jarvan or against Jarvan will know that that shield is more used for the slow than really the shield, because the shield is really negligible. 4% max health scaling is going to make the shield bigger, and it's actually going to be probably going to be useful as a shield itself, so that's pretty amazing as well. And finally, his ult is getting a new effect where people inside the ult is going to deal 12 to 20% reduced damage, which is pretty huge. Like, normally you want to be ulting like the enemy mage or ADC anyway, so when they get ulted, they're gonna have way less damage than what they would have. So this is pretty interesting of a thing to add to his ultimate. So his ultimate now, I mean, it generally just makes him better because whoever you're ulting is generally a priority target anyway, and you're never really gonna ult the tank, so you're ulting some kind of damage dealer to try to trap them and kill them. So this is gonna, of course, make it really hard for them to kill you. So when you trap yourself in there with them, you now actually have an advantage. Whereas, you know, previously sometimes like when you play J4, you kind of like quote unquote int by trapping yourself with someone you can't actually defeat. Like, let's say you ult a like Vayne, for example, she just condemns you into the wall, kills you, and you basically look like a fool. But now with the damage reduction, this is gonna help out against a lot of like mages and ADCs, help you kill them a lot more easily because they can't kill you. Next up, we have Jayce getting a buff. So Jayce's buff is basically his base AD is going up by 2. Of course, this will minorly help his laning. His second ability in Hammer Stance is now getting a damage ratio to monsters of 70%. So this is hurting his jungle clear. It's basically a nerf. Next up, his third ability, which is the Hammer Stance Thundering Blow. Damage ratio is actually going up. In terms of the percent target max health. So AD scaling is the same, but the target max health percentage is going up in the lower ranks. Now, since you max this skill last, a lot like Irelia, this is a really useful buff because you're going to get 2% extra damage onto the target's maximum health. So this is again going to help your early game a lot. However, of course, the damage to monsters now is also going down. So this basically implies that they've been seeing too much Jayce jungle and they don't want Jayce to be in the jungle. So they're nerfing all of his jungle statistics, but all of his laning statistics is actually still really good. And in fact, it's being buffed. And finally, when you change form into Hammer Stance, you're now going to actually get more resistances because it's going to actually scale with your bonus AD. So when you go into Hammer form, it's going to make you a lot more tanky than what it already did, which is of course pretty huge. Next up, Karma. So Karma I've always felt is one of the best supports. However, as of late, I actually kind of felt that she isn't really performing too well, even though I'm putting her in the highest tier for support. I was actually planning to drop her down this coming patch, but we don't know if these buffs will change that. But basically her damage on her Q base damage is going up by 10 in all ranks, and the mantra bonus damage also going up by 10 in all ranks. Now 10 damage is not the most in the world, especially because it's not scaling, it's just base damage, but you know, of course 10 damage is more damage is always gonna be good. And finally, her shield value on her shield, obviously, is actually going up, and the AP ratio is going up as well. So in addition to having 10 extra shield on every rank up, you're actually also getting 15% extra ability power, and this also applies to the mantra version. Apologies for the text message that I received there. I forgot to mute my phone. But anyways, let's move on to the rest. So again, just more buffs here. MF is getting a armor buff of 4 as well as armor per level buff, basically making her slightly more tanky, slightly harder to kill. Overall, it's going to be helpful but not game changing. Her double up crit damage after doubling up from 150% is now actually, in my opinion, this is a nerf, but it's going now from 130 to scaling all the way up to 160. So at like max rank, it's actually going to be 160, which is higher than 150. But while you do level this up, when you do max this out first, you're only gonna be able to max this out at, like, let's see, around level 7, level 8. I think level 8 is where you max it out. So you're gonna have to wait till level 8 to max it out, and before level 8, it's gonna be either a worse or equal version of the previous double up. And considering MF is the kind of champ that you need to get a lead in lane to kind of snowball and carry, this is basically a nerf, even though they say it's a buff. It's technically a buff when you hit max rank, but overall it is a nerf to me. Now, next up, Strut, her W, is getting a new passive. So if she doesn't take damage for 4 seconds, she gains 25 bonus movement speed. I believe that was always there. 3 seconds later, the bonus movement speed increases to 80. This was kind of always there, I think. Just that I think this is more. Like, as in, I think that it used to be gain 25 and then it doubles and doubles again or something like that. I'm not really too sure. Oh no, it used to be after 4 seconds she gains movement speed and then it doubles. So it used to be, let's say, 25 and 50. So now instead it's going to 80, 85, 90, 95. Honestly, movement speed on Strut, it is helpful to rotate. I don't know if this is going to still activate whenever you hit your W. The bonus movement speed increase instantly activating on W cast. Not too sure about that, but we're going to have to see. I don't think that this affects too much though. And the active bonus attack speed is going up in the earlier ranks, which is 15% extra at the first rank, which is the ability max second, but 15% extra at the first rank is still going to be really, really useful. So it is overall still a buff, but this aspect of Misfortune is probably the most minor portion to buff, and also the nerf to her Q is pretty damaging, so I don't really think that this kind of makes too much sense. But anyways, Pyke, AD per level is going up by roughly 1 as well. His Bone Skewer damage is going up by 10 at all ranks. However, the damage ratio to minions and monsters are now getting nerfed to the ground back to 50%, which is what it used to be before they did the Pyke in lane and Pyke in jungle experiment, where it found too much success and they started nerfing the ratios. Now they're nerfing the ratios back to the base amount. So basically, this is going to kick Pyke completely out of the jungle and lane. Basically, he's going to be only purely a support, like how he was quote-unquote meant to be, depending on how you want to see champion design. But also, he's getting a 10 damage buff to his E as well. And the stun duration is actually going up by 0.25 seconds, which, as you guys know from, like, you know, watching my breakdowns, stun duration getting increased by, like, even something as little as 0.25 or 0.5 is really, really huge. So Pyke is getting a relatively huge buff, all things considered, you know, because of his stun duration and, like, minor damage increases to his 2 damaging abilities. Riven getting the same treatment as Pyke and other champions like Jace as well. Now his passive only does half damage to monsters, so that is going to kick her out of the jungle, probably. And her Q damage is actually going up at all ranks. So both the scaling portion as well as the base portion is going up at all ranks, so it's going to overall do more damage. And the cooldown on her E is getting buffed by 1 second. Now, her E has been, like, buffed and nerfed by 1 second countless times. Like, when Riven is too strong, it gets nerfed by 1 second. When she's too weak, it gets buffed by 1 second. So this is like a reversion if you want to think about it in that way, but it's also kind of like a buff if you want to think about it in that way. But overall, should make Riven a little bit stronger. And finally, Sion is getting a base damage increase on his third ability, Roar of the Slayer. And also the mana consumption is going down, so overall less mana, more damage, amazing. Honestly, not too big of a change for Scion. And Mark of the Week cooldown is getting buffed from 20 seconds to 15 seconds. I did feel 20 seconds was pretty long, but then again, Mark of the Week did give pretty strong effects. So overall, I guess it's not performing up to standard, so it's now getting, the cooldown's getting reduced, so it can be used more often. And finally, Glacial Augment is actually getting nerfed, which is kind of surprising because I actually felt that it was okay. I felt if anything should be nerfed, it's probably going to be First Strike. But anyways, Glacial Augment, instead of 2%, instead of the 2% of bonus health of carrier plus 20%, is now 1.5 bonus health of carrier plus 20% slow. Now this affects tanks, doesn't really affect enchanters who use it, so champions like Nami, Janna are not going to be affected, but of course the other champions like the Alistars, Leonas, and Nautiluses are of course going to be affected, so slow is overall going to be slightly weaker. Honestly, this is not too big of a nerf. Damage reduction is going down from 15 to 12%, which is probably the bigger section of the nerf, because 15% damage reduction is huge, and 12% is still huge, but is definitely less. So we're gonna have to see how that affects Glacial Augment. Honestly, I feel like whoever wants to take Glacial Augment or used to take Glacial Augment is still gonna do so. But yeah, that's pretty much gonna be all for the patch 4.3b first look breakdown. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and goodbye.